Hello everybody, welcome to the online video presentation. I am Mohammad Sharif, lecturer in English, Nalanda Degree College, Anantapur. Today we are going to deal with the short story, The Interpreter of Maladies. It is written by Jhumpa Lahiri. She is born to an Indian immigrant family while they were in London. Later, the family moved to United States of America when she was around 2 years of age. Her writings of short story collection Interpreter of Maladies was published in the year 1999. She later wrote a novel by name Namesake, which was published in the year 2003. Later, she published a few more collections in the form of short stories, Unaccustomed Earth in the year 2008 and a novel, The Lowland, in the year 2013. Now, let us study the characters in this story. The story has got a total of a family and a cab driver. One of them is Mr. Das, Mrs. Das, Roni, their child, Tina, their daughter, and another child, Bobby. Then there is a cab driver, Mr. Kapasi. Mrs. and Mr. Das are Indian Americans or the Indo-Americans. Let us now have a look at this story. Mrs. and Mr. Das are Indian Americans. Their ancestors belong to India. So once in 2 or 3 years, they visit India to see their relatives. So the story begins with a background of Mrs. and Mr. Das, who now stay in America, but their forefathers belong to India and they still stay in India. So the family visits India once in 2 or 3 years. And during this visit, they have engaged a middle-aged tour guide, Mr. Kapasi, to visit the tourist places. So when they come to India, they also take it as an opportunity to visit the different places in India which have got a lot of importance. And this time, they have engaged Mr. Kapasi, who is a tour guide and a driver. So now let us enter into the story. During this tour, Mr. Kapasi notices that there is no maturity in the behavior of Mrs. and Mr. Das. They do not have proper understanding about each other and are selfish in their mottos. Look at this. See, when the couple comes out, when they are in the society, when they are outside their house, they should behave properly. But what Mr. Kapasi, the driver, the cab driver or the tour guide has noticed is that they are behaving very childish. They are not taking care of anybody. They are very selfish. They live for themselves. Okay. They do not take proper care of their children also. And a simple example is when Tina, the daughter, asked her mother to take her to the restroom, the parents had a big argument about who has to take her to the restroom. Usually, in the Indian context, when a girl wants to go to the restroom, usually the mother accompanies her. Here, when we go through this story in the textbook, when Tina asks that, her mother tells her husband to take her to the restroom. And Mr. Das says, no, it is not his duty, she has to take her. Then they start arguing how much time they have spent for their children. And finally, Mr. Das says, the day before, he had given bath to Tina, so he has completed his duty towards Tina, and now today it is the duty of the mother to take care of the child. Then only Mrs. Das moves and take her to the restroom. This means they are dividing their responsibilities. They are calculating their responsibilities towards their children, which is not a very good sign of a parent. On their way, the driver also notices several things. When Mr. Das gets out of the car for sightseeing during their way to Sun Temple, Mrs. Das sits in the car busy eating snacks without offering them to anybody, including their children. So actually the prime purpose of their visit is to see different places. But when the father and the children get down, the mother stays back in the car and she will be busy eating or she will be doing some other works. So this indicates the attitude of Mrs. Das, and she is so selfish that she won't even offer the snacks to her children also. Let's see the description how she behaves. She always wears sunglasses. So while sitting in the car also she wears sunglasses and keeps herself busy painting her nails, things like that. And when young Tina, the daughter, asks her to paint her nails, Mrs. Das refuses to do so. This is the peak of her selfishness. Okay, usually children are very much attracted towards nail polishing or the mehendi, things like this. During this long drive to the Sun Temple, there is a conversation between the driver and the family. During that time, Mr. and Mrs. Das ask Kapasi about his previous job. He tells them that he used to work as an interpreter in a doctor's clinic. An interpreter is a person who first listens to the problems of the patients with a lot of empathy and then report the same to the doctor so that the doctor can give some medicine. Because the doctor will be busy, so he cannot spend a lot of time discussing with the patient. A long discussion he cannot have, he or she cannot have. So Mr. Kapasi was an interpreter, a person who listens to the problems and who later translates it or interprets it to the doctor in the proper way. According to Kapasi, he enjoyed his job because several patients come to him, talk to him, express their problems, and he sympathizes them, he empathizes them, all these things happen. And it is also to be noticed that Mr. Kapasi was very good to respond in an empathetic way. Okay, empathetic is perfectly understanding the problem from the patient's perspective. Okay, but the reason for leaving the job was that his wife was not happy with his job because she feels the doctor he was supporting was not good enough because the doctor could not cure the typhoid fever of their son. That is the reason why he has left the job. This is a turning point. This conversation is a turning point in this particular story. Knowing how good is Mr. Kapasi to understand the problems of the other people, Mrs. Das starts behaving very closely with him. She takes a few photos with him when the family gets down at a roadside motel and they have their food or snacks or tea. And also, she used to come and sit with Mr. Kapasi while the family, the children and the father sit at some place. She used to come and sit with Mr. Kapasi and she used to chat with him. She used to take photographs. She used to behave very closely. This sends Mr. Kapasi to think in a different way, the relationships in a different way. This is a, we can say it's a male attitude. Yeah. So she promises him that the photo she is taking, she will send by post when she goes back to America and all these things. And Mr. Kapasi starts thinking of some nice and romantic conversation in that correspondence. Then what happens? After visiting the Sun Temple um, with this attitude, Mr. Kapasi suggests them that they can also visit the nearby hills called Udayagiri and Khandagiri, which are very beautiful places and which are the more visitors places. Okay, so the family agrees for that, and they start moving towards Udayagiri, and they reach the beautiful hills and hillocks of Udayagiri, and they start enjoying. Here we have to understand one thing: the children were very enthusiastic to be out in the open place, in the greenish, lavish green trees and all these surroundings. Particularly because in the American context, the life is very closed. Even to see a monkey, they have to travel long and longer distances. But in this story, there is a description where, while passing through in their car, the children enjoy a lot excited to watch monkeys on the road. They say monkeys, monkeys on the road, because they have never seen monkeys on the road while they stay in America. So that is the reason why the children are very enthusiastic, and they get down from the car and they start running to enjoy and explore the beauties of nature. However, Mrs. Das remains in the car and keeps her conversation with Mr. Kapasi because she wants to discuss a lot with him instead of enjoying the beauties of nature. And during this personal conversation, Mrs. Das reveals the secret of an extramarital relationship of hers with one of her classmates and about the birth of Bobby. This, after listening, Mr. Kapasi feels very bad and dejected about Mrs. Das and her character. Here, one thing we have to understand, that is, the story is running in the background of a different culture. Indian culture is entirely different from the European culture. There, certain things may be not as taken in the Indian context. Whereas in India, certain values are given highest priority. So it was very casual for her to discuss about her extramarital relationship and about the birth of the child Bobby. But as an Indian, Mr. Kapasi feels it very bad. So he feels dejected and he wants to return back immediately. Exactly at this juncture, young Bobby, who was surrounded by a group of monkeys, yells for help. His voice was in pain and anguish. So the monkeys have attacked him for snatching some eatables from his hands. So listening to this horrible yell, Mr. Kapasi rushes to the spot to rescue the child. He fights with the monkeys and he gets the child back safely. At this juncture, when all this skirmish is going on, Mrs. Das loses the address card or address slip that Mr. Das has given. But she did not notice that. And Mr. Kapasi feels very happy that she doesn't have his address anymore with her now. He was so dejected, he don't want to have any communication even. So finally, he drops them back at the hotel and returns his home. Now, let us try to sense the moral of this story. This story is all about to educate us the importance of how to behave with maturity when we are out in the society, and it also advises us not to behave childish in front of others, people who are known or unknown, whatever it may be. As long as you are into the society, you have to behave yourself. It also teaches us about adhering to the responsibilities. Everybody has got their responsibility and they have to follow them, they have to fulfill them. Particularly in this case, Mr. and Mrs. Das are the parents and they should know their responsibilities towards their children. So they failed there. So it gives us a message that we have to be very careful in fulfilling our responsibilities. The story also tells us about the need of keeping private matters unexposed. Definitely, we have to keep certain things to ourselves. We should not speak about things to others, particularly when there is a cultural difference. The culture of one country will be different from another country. Even the culture of one place may be different from another place. The culture of one community may be different from the culture of another community. So when we have a conversation, when we have a discussion with people, we have to notice the cultural differences between them and us. Okay. So the entire story reflects the cultural differences between America and the Indian culture. Okay. Finally and prominently, it speaks that any person who don't follow moral values will not be respected by others. Hope you got the essence of this particular story. Thank you and have a good day.